Can I, s-
For it, okay.
can I just ask one question? What can you see on the screen?
Eligibility for devotion, chapter 2.
And you can't see anything else, no?
I can see you.
Oh God. Okay, now you can see me without the projection. Okay.
Yeah.
Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachaline Nivasisha Sunyavhari Prashtatara Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so let me make Sahachari Mother. I just make you the co-host. Give me a second.
Yeah, sure, Murli Prabhu.
Yeah, okay. More make co-host. Okay,
Thank you.
great. Okay, so let's begin. Let me just bring up a portion of the screen. Next. Okay, so we covered this last week, but I thought, as you know, I like to do a bit of a synopsis. I thought it'll also be good to have a bit of a test for all those taking part. I can ask you a few questions to begin with before we move on. These are the subjects that we have touched so far, and today we're going to be continuing with semblance of faith, the last on the list there. But it just be good to hear from devotees this first bullet point here. What is the significance? Can you remember that discussion of Srila Prabhupada's naming his society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness? What was all that about? Why not God consciousness? That's the question I'm putting out.
Because with the God consciousness, impersonalist can creep in. When it's Krishna, then exactly we know who exactly the person we're talking about is.
Yeah, it's very specific. It's very specific, and exactly, yeah, that's true. The impersonalists could come under that term, the International Society for God Consciousness, and so Prabhupada was very specific because it refers to Krishna, and therefore also refers to Krishna specifically and his pastimes, etc. So Prabhupada was very specific, yes. And what's the ultimate definition of Krishna consciousness that was given in the beginning? A little bit esoterical or esoterical from one perspective. What do we ultimately want to achieve? What's the ultimate, or what could be an ultimate definition of Krishna consciousness? I'm not looking for a too long esoterical answer. Could be quite straightforward.
But Krishna is a person. He's got a form. He's got a name. He's got an address.
Yeah, but we're looking for, yes, that's true. That's more in line to the first question. But the ultimate definition of Krishna consciousness.
Conscious of Krishna?
Sorry, Mother Vishalni?
Conscious of Krishna all the time.
Yeah, but no. Anybody
To
else?
have Krishna in our heart every time, all the time.
In our heart, yeah. But specifically here, we brought out that the ultimate, I mean, all your answers are correct, but the ultimate definition of Krishna consciousness is everything that is related to a Goloka Vrindavan and obtaining a position in one of the rasas and therefore serving Krishna in spontaneous love. So that's ultimately what we're aiming for. So that was the ultimate definition of Krishna conscious. Yeah, everything you said is correct, but in the ultimate issue, then it ultimately means to enter into a personal, very, very personal relationship with Krishna. And the third bullet point here, what is Sambandha Gyan to begin with?
Sambandha Gyan is, I am your servant, Krishna is my master.
Yeah, or knowledge of relationship. Yeah, knowledge of our relationship with Krishna, Krishna's relationship with us, and Krishna's relationship in the material world, and our relationship with the material world as well. So why do we need to understand it? What's the importance? What did we mention there about the importance of understanding this topic?
That we're fully dependent on Krishna.
Mother Sachari, yeah. So yeah.
That we're fully dependent on Krishna.
Yeah, that's that comes up as a definition of pure faith. Because it mentioned, right, we gave a quote from Prabhupada and also Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and also Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that unless we do have a firm understanding of Sambandha Gyan, then we may not be able to advance very progressively. So it's good for us to understand, for example, that we are the eternal servant of Krishna. Yeah, without having a understanding of this, then we may be confused upon the path. And where do we get Sambandha Gyan from?
Sambandha Gyana you can get from different sources.
Like what, for example?
Oh, so many.
Krishna.
Guru Sadhan Shastra, for example.
Yes, correct. And who specifically?
The spiritual master?
Srila Prabhupada's books. Yeah. It's all about Sambandha Gyan. Well, also Prayojan as well, and also Abhidheya. But so, in other words, we are required, or it's good for us to read and study Srila Prabhupada's books. Yeah. And so you're correct, Vijay Krishna. Yes, Guru Sadhu. Yeah.
Yes, I did mention Shastra.
Shastra. Yeah, you're right. But specifically, we're focusing specifically on it. It's all in Prabhupada's books, Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayojana. So specifically, Sambandha, in order for us to advance nicely, we have to be well grounded in the knowledge of Sambandha. And then the next bullet point here: where does it begin? How does devotion awaken in a conditioned soul?
By mercy of Krishna and Guru.
Yeah, by the mercy of Krishna, no doubt, which manifests in the mercy of a guru or the mercy, or the mercy of a devotee of Krishna. But how does it begin or how might that begin?
Accidental charity, unintentional charity.
Yeah, Alexander, perhaps you can elaborate on that more.
When you practice some pious activity unintentionally, where you serve Vaishnav unknowingly, where you do some form of charity.
Yeah, that's it. That's unknowing devotional service, like also known as Bhakti on Mukhi Sukriti. Yeah, and for example, as Alexander said, someone may be very charitable, and then they happen to give charity to a devotee, which is actually devotional service. Or one may be favorably disposed to a devotee without even knowing that they're a devotee, but they may be favorably disposed and to treat them kindly. So therefore, that is devotional, that is unknowing devotional service, and that will build up. Then eventually they'll be attracted to Krishna, to the topics of Krishna, and attracted to the devotees in a Pacific life. Yeah.
And Murli Prabhu, if I may, just to add to the answer of Alexander Prabhu, I have a quote in my Vaishnava manual which goes as follows: you cannot become a devotee unless you have in yourself the accumulation of enough pious credits.
Yeah. And if you study a bit more, if you study, you'll see further that those pious credits are not material piety. It's actually devotional piety. Yeah. So in that sense, bhakti leads to bhakti. But it does so happen that a person who is materially pious, because of that material piety, they may give charity or be kind to a Vaishnava. Yeah. So it says,
Yes.
We have a good example. Narad Muni, 4 months serving those Vaishnavas.
Yeah, very good example. Narada Muni, he was serving the Bhakti Vedantas, and Narada Muni tells that story of how he became a great exalted devotee. So his mother was a maidservant. She was serving the devotees, and he was also assisting as well and serving. So he was accumulating great bhakti or mukhi sukriti. Yes, that's a very good example. Does anyone remember the example? Sorry, Mother Chandravali, carry on.
Also, we read that these Gopas in Vrindavan, they also had so much piety that they eventually became Gopals.
Yeah, we was reading that last night in our reading of Brihat Bhagavatamrita.
Yeah.
Krita Punya Punya. Sukadeva Goswami is astounded at the good fortune of the Gopas, and he exclaims, how much piety must they have acquired to actually be personally associating with Krishna? But we're just given a further detail here that piety is bhakti, om mukhi sukriti. It is not material. Yes, so that's how devotion awakens. And this next one here, the first sprout to appear, we spoke about that. What's the symptoms of pure faith? What's the characteristics of pure faith?
Complete dependence on Krishna.
Yes, correct. Complete dependence on Krishna. That's here. Trust in scripture, taste for devotion, and that's here. These are the characteristics of that pure faith. And here's a specific verse here, which we've read a few times. Confident, firm faith that rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, everything is taken care of. So complete dedication and complete dependence upon Krishna. Yes. And then, so well done. We got a good grasp of what we've been going over. So we're going to continue now this subject here, semblance of faith. But I'll ask another question here. Can someone just give a little synopsis of the semblance of faith? And then we'll officially start, so to speak.
Semblance is not real faith. It's Abhas faith, Abhas Shraddha.
Yeah, and we will, and hopefully we will get there, but we'll be speaking about that specifically, that specific word you used, Abbas. So it's a semblance, it's an outward appearance. Yeah. So so in other words, by the mercy of the deliberate succession and Srila Prabhupada and a respective spiritual master or the devotees of the Lord, we have been given the seed of pure devotion. So that is characterized, as we have said, by exclusive devotion and complete dependence on Krishna. So that's what we understand to be pure faith. So although we may not be pure devotees in the full sense of the term, we are on the path of pure devotional service because we have been given the seed of pure devotion, the Bhakti Ladha Bija. So in that sense, we're greatly fortunate, but we need to be attentive. Why do we need to be attentive? I'm just summarizing what we did last week. Because along with the Bhakti Ladha Bija, what can also grow?
Weeds, creepers.
Creepers, yes. Yeah. So although we're very fortunate, we need to be attentive that our Bhakti Ladha doesn't become stunted by non-devotional weeds. So in other words, one's exclusive devotion and dependence to Krishna becomes compromised. So then our faith will become what Mother Rajkishore said to be a shadow of pure faith. Yes. So in order to make progress, and we covered this last week on the path of pure devotion and faith, we need to be able to recognize the symptoms of impure faith. We need to recognize the weeds and bring ourselves back into the line of the principles of pure faith. And here's some of the causes that we went over last week of the weeds. Maybe not strictly following the instructions that we have received from the spiritual master. So that was the definition of the seed of devotion. It's the rules and methods by which one can advance in devotional service. That is what we have been given by the spiritual master. So in that sense, that is the seed. But if we don't follow the rules and regulations given by the spiritual master, then there's a good chance that this pure faith is not going to develop, and instead weeds will develop. So in that case, so in other words, sometimes along with the watering of the Bhakti Ladha Bija, sometimes we may be watering the weeds. So in other words, that may take the form as, so we're rendering devotional service and we might start desiring name, fame, adoration, etc. But we're practicing devotional service, but we might start, we might start to become attracted to being praised. We start to want profit, etc. And that's described, and we describe that. Remember, we read that whole purport in the Madhya Lila. So Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in identifying the weeds. So these are here. Unacceptable behavior. I think Mother Vishalni asked last week, what is unacceptable behavior? Can you remember what we explained? Yeah, we read it in Madhya Lila.
Following the 4 regulative principles we talked about.
Or not following the 4 regulative principles. So acceptable behavior. Yeah, it may be quite obvious, but sometimes it may be quite subtle as well, where devotee, for instance, maybe sometimes it happens, for instance, in a temple, there may be lots of money coming into the temple. And then, we've had it a couple of times where lots of money's coming to the temple, and then all of a sudden, someone disappears with all the cash. We shouldn't laugh, but sometimes it happens. So unacceptable behavior, not following regular principles, seeing the material benefits from devotion. It gets quite subtle. These are just kind of looking at them from a broad category. It can get quite subtle. And we could speak a lot about this and diplomatic behavior. One is not being straightforward for one reason or another. And that one reason, maybe they've got some ulterior material motive in the way they're dealing with people or dealing with things, etc. And that might cause all types of difficulties. So being diplomatic and interested in animal killing, that's brought up as well. Or mundane, so doing devotional service for profit adoration, or popularity. These are some of the weeds that may grow. And also, we mentioned a side point as well last week that that we ourselves may be, hopefully, we're on the path of pure devotion, but some people that we may meet, they may not be ready to accept the path of complete dedication and dependence upon Krishna. Yeah. So in other words, so in our preaching, we have to learn instead to engage those persons in acts of devotion without demanding full surrender. You should be completely dependent upon Krishna. You should be completely dedicated, give up all this nonsense of this or that. Or so, in other words, we engage them, we invite them to festivals, to join in the kirtan and to take prasadam. So that was a sign point that we mentioned. And then we also spoke last week about the effects of the modes of material nature. Yeah, they can also they have it's because the original relationship that Jiva has with Krishna is one of pure devotion, so it's pure and transcendental. So our faith is reposed only in Krishna, but then in contact with material nature, that faith becomes distorted and may be influenced by other things. So, and then there's this quote here that we read: faith directed towards spiritual life is in the mode of goodness. Faith rooted in fruitive work is in the mode of passion. Faith residing in irreligious activities is in the mode of ignorance. But faith in my devotional service is purely transcendental. Okay, so everyone's got faith, but they, according to how they're affected by the modes of material nature, their faith is going to go in a specific direction. So that's the effect of the modes of material nature. Okay, so well done. That's what we covered last week. And let me bring up any questions or comments. Hope we've got a clear picture of where we've been so far. So this is chapter 3, part 2, eligibility for devotion. Now it gets a little bit detailed here. It gets a little bit complicated. So just before this, I was looking at the notes and I've tried to pick out the essence to make it as understandable as possible. Okay, so you just bear with us. Hopefully you'll be able to understand this. So what's being spoken of here is that this semblance, it's a broad category. Now, within that semblance, it can be divided. You can look at it closely. You can look at it more closely and divide it into two. So one is a reflective semblance of devotion, and one is a shadowy semblance of devotion. So if you're into the Sanskrit, so reflective means Pratimbha. And as Mother of Raj Kishore said, shadowy means Chaya, or is also known as Chaya. So Pratimbha means it's a reflection or a mirror-like projection. I have a Sanskrit dictionary in the form of ChatGPT. If anyone didn't know, ChatGPT makes us a good Sanskrit dictionary. Just put the Sanskrit word in and it gives you the definition. So Pratimbha means it's a reflection. And that's in the tree. You see the tree here? It is reflected. Yeah. And then Chaya, that's a shadow. So Chaya is a shadow. So we'll be explaining these two. Okay. So a reflective semblance of devotion and a shadowy semblance of devotion. So let's discuss a reflective semblance of devotion. So this you may see you may see this, for example, in those who their understanding is that Lord Vishnu is a manifestation of impersonal Brahman. So they may take up some aspects of bhakti, but they do it specifically with this misunderstanding, and to obtain heavenly planets or some type of impersonal liberation. Because they understand that the practices of bhakti, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam or going to the temple, can give them credits for attaining heaven, heavenly planets. So they have some faith. They're maybe coming to a temple or going to a pravachan, a 7-day Bhagavad Saptaha, but they don't have pure dependence or dedication on the Krishna. They think that the activities of bhakti is a means to obtain the heavenly planets. So externally, they may engage in worship of Krishna. So they got some faith, but it's not pure faith. It is reflective. So in other words, they don't have faith in the eternity of Krishna's form, the spiritual world, but they don't give much credit to service to Krishna. Now, often these people, or these can be known as Mayavadis. Yeah. So they may give some type of respect, as we mentioned, to reading Bhagavatam or reading Bhagavad Gita. They may even learn all the verses of Bhagavad Gita, for example. But they see these activities in order to ultimately fulfill their own specific, could say, selfish goals. Ultimately, they're designed some type of sense gratification. And it can get quite perverted. Because, for example, some Mayavadis, they have with the distorted knowledge that we are all God, they then they do, in some cases, try to enjoy with other people's wives, quoting the rasa dance of Krishna, because we're all God. Yeah, I'm God, and there's God, Krishna, and he's doing rasa, so I am God, so I can do the same. And we won't go into details, but these things go on in India, even today. So it gets quite gross. This is a reflective semblance of faith. Is it faith at all? There's something there, but they're distorted knowledge that, for instance, the Mayavadi misunderstanding that we are all God. So this is Pratimbha, okay? Also known as Pratimbha. Now, another shade of this it's a slightly different. So it may not be to justify gross sense gratification. It may be in the name of devotion or love. So these Mayavadis, they will see that there's no difference between Vishnu and the demigods. So they have the misconception that that the demigods can bestow pure devotion or love. Now, this is, with all due respects to Ramakrishna, is very well known in India. Now, he was reputed to have achieved prema through the worship of the demigoddess Kali. That was his claim. So this is an example of a reflective semblance of faith. Now, can this be purified? Can this reflective semblance of faith be purified? In other words, this Mayavadi conception. I mean, it can be, but it is extremely rare. So this reflective semblance of faith, perhaps we'll ask, why is it not possible? Why is it very difficult that this can be purified? This reflective semblance of faith.
Because the faith is like a mirror. So what you see in the mirror might look exactly as we are, but it's not real.
Yeah, that's a definition. It is not real. I mean, it looks like it is, but this specific Mayavadi misconception, how can you convert a Mayavadi, or why is it often very difficult?
Because they don't see Krishna as a person. They don't see Krishna as person and that he is supreme. They see themselves as God.
Yeah, ultimately, I remember having one conversation with we was doing our Bhagavad Gita reading in a temple, and one man came and sat down. You know, we had an open forum. Everyone could sit down and join the circle and read Gita. And it came to his time to read, and he started reading. And then after he finished the purport, then comments, questions, and he started speaking. And it was a complete, I could say, Mayavad in every sense of the word. He started speaking Mayavad philosophy. Yeah, I am one, and Krishna is me, and all the devotees are like alarm bells were going off in our circle. We was all looking at each other and waiting for him to stop speaking. He was speaking this full-on Mayavad philosophy. I am you and you are me, and it's very good you are reading this, etc., etc. You know. So then I just read Prabhupada's purport. I think I just read the next purport where Prabhupada actually began to dismantle the Mayavad philosophy. I begin to give Prabhupada's arguments and the futility of Mayavad philosophy. But then he was just he was kind of smiling and he said, "Yes, I accept what you are saying because you are also the one." You understand? So he was just saying he didn't accept what I was saying actually. He was just saying because I am God and I am speaking, even though it was taking his philosophy to pieces, he was seeing it as the oneness of God is speaking. I guess.
Is it because it's very deep rooted?
Yeah, that's the point. It's very deep rooted, and this comes up when we also speak about the shadowy semblance of faith, and we make a comparison. It's a very good point. It's very deep rooted, and and it cannot be purified. They have to drop the whole thing. Ramanath Prabhu, yes, nice for you to be with us.
I'm back again. Yeah, it's very deep rooted. It's a cultural conditioning based on Smarta Brahmana influence in India, the Panchalopasana system of worship, which basically says that all the gods are coming from the same impersonal Brahman.
Yeah.
This is the stereotypical quote unquote Hinduism that ISKCON is not. It's actually 180 degrees opposite in many ways what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is all about. But in the proper association of devotees, reading Prabhupada's books, I've seen it time and time again. People can overcome those conditionings. Yes, it is difficult, but ultimately that's our job as devotees to help these impersonal based Sanatan Dharma into the pure understanding of Krishna, Radha and Krishna, Vraj Bhakti, all of that. It can be done, but it is difficult. But in the association of devotees, chanting Hare Krishna, especially reading Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada's association is the main thing that can clarify these misconceptions. But you're right. It's difficult to overcome, but at the same time, that's our job. This is what we're here to do: is to try our best to dispel these misconceptions. It doesn't happen overnight. Many times it's a gradual process. But I think part of my comment or question even is, isn't this what Varnashram is all about? Is to bring in this larger umbrella of Sanatana Dharma adherence closer to Krishna consciousness. Isn't this what Prabhupada was talking about? 50% of his mission is still unfulfilled.
Well, yeah, thanks. A very good point. So, first of all, if it, like I gave that example of that person who was of Mayavadi persuasion, and I was speaking the philosophy, but he's taken it so deeply, he's embraced it so much that it's difficult for him to hear. Now, some people they kind of innocently kind of come across, or they're innocently brought up with Mayavad interpretations. But when they hear the right thing, then they can quickly come over to devotional service. They can quickly change, and they can quickly drop it. And I've also had that experience where we've been reading Bhagavad Gita, and we're just reading Prabhupada's purports, and they may come from a Mayavad background, but they haven't embraced it in their hearts, so to speak, and they're not speaking and trying to defend it all the time. They've just innocently picked it up. But when they hear from the devotees and they hear Prabhupada's presentation, then they quickly accept the Prabhupada's ultimate conclusion in the Bhagavad Gita. But it can be purified, and you mentioned the system of Vana and Ashram. It can be purified with the, as you mentioned, with by associating with the pure devotees of the Lord. So, but the danger is if they're Mayavadis and they become antagonistic to a Krishna, then that can be offensive, and that's when it can become extremely difficult.
Of course, anyone can become offensive, but yeah, you're right.
That's when it becomes difficult.
Yeah, this is maybe kind of an aside to what you're trying to present in tonight's lesson, but Bhakti Vinod Thakur has an approach to Jaiva Varnashram that does include the gradual progression from demigod worship to pure worship of Radha and Krishna. Whereas Prabhupada's presentation was not like that, because Prabhupada was basically preaching to the Westerners who were not conditioned by this heavy Panchopasana, Smarta Brahmana, and conditioning that's coming out of 80% of Indian teachings is basically impersonalism.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good point. But the actual for them to come through the pathway of worshipping the different devas and Durga and Panchaposhana, etc., to make it to the path of pure devotion is extremely difficult. They've got to perfectly worship all the demigods, and to make that transition isn't very easy. Isn't very easy to actually make that transition. No.
Yeah.
That's why Prabhupada didn't give that, because you can see it's the age of Kali and we're very short-lived. I mean, that's why Bhagavatam doesn't give the.
It's not easy, but I do see examples of those devotees that kind of like poke through that barrier and understand what Prabhupada is saying. Sometimes they can become really strong devotees, good devotees, and understand what they're doing as compared to their prior Hindu lifestyle that they grew up with. Or, I mean, you have so many examples. Look at what Keshava Swami is doing. Basically born in this kind of a Hindu cultural background, but he was intelligent and read Prabhupada's books and completely transformed his perspective and understanding. Now he's traveling all over the world, preaching up a storm in Krishna consciousness. So it can happen. Not that everyone's going to become a Keshava Swami, but there's many. I see many good devotees from Indian background, Hindu background, and they're practicing Krishna consciousness as best they can. I mean, a lot of times you have the cultural Hindu Mayavad background comes through. But again, with the right association and clarification, reading Prabhupada's books, they can become strong devotees.
Yeah, we just have Julian Leela Mother, you have your hand up, and then we're.
Yeah, I just remembered Prabhupada was saying with the ascending process, we can come on our own till the impersonal Brahman realization. He says that in one purport, that we have this oneness, but then the difference part is only possible by descending process. And so when we are Brahmavadis, they may change. They listen, they read the books, they hear Prabhupada, and then even if they're demigod worshippers, they are ready to hear the rest. But when they are staunch impersonalists, like Murli Prabhu said, then nothing helps. Like they are so convinced everything is one, and they don't believe in a descending process. Then it's actually impossible to change them. But when they're open that the philosophy can be one and different, then they may change.
Yeah, and
This
this
is what
is
I understood.
yeah, good point. And this way I speak of next, means they have a shadowy semblance of faith. It's not reflective. Yeah. So thank you for that. And just back to your point, Ramanath Prabhu. Yeah, I mean, well, where it's questionable whether these, as you mentioned, Keshava Swami was specifically following the path of Pancha Poshana and worshipping all the different devas, and the point they came in touch with the devotees of the Lord, so but I'm just saying the path without the association of the devotees of the Lord to come to the path of pure devotion by worshipping the different demigods and everything that's involved, and to do
That's
that in one
impossible.
lifetime. Yeah, to do that in one lifetime and come to the conclusion of pure devotion. But if they meet a devotee, then they can bypass all these different types of methods of worship.
It can be quite quick, but for most people, it is that gradual process. Year by year or decade by decade, they can become purified by chanting and associating with devotees, reading Prabhupada's books. I've seen it over and over again.
Yeah.
Not everyone, like Julian was saying, that some people have this absolute Mayavad fixation in their mind and heart, and that's totally offensive, and they cannot really engage in
Yeah.
devotional service.
And that's what we're speaking about here. This is a
Yeah.
topic that we're specifically speaking about. It's that type of faith, pratibimba, reflective
Yeah.
evidence of faith. Yeah. And Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, he mentions that Prakasananda Saraswati Thakur and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they were staunch Mayavadis, but because of the potency and power
Yes.
of Lord
Yeah.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then he converted them to exalted Vaishnavas. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, may I say something?
Shoni. Please, yes.
I came from a Mayavadi philosophy. I came from Jain background, Mayavad.
Yeah.
And from a very young age, I was very interested in puja and going to the temple and serving. And then as I grew up, I read lots of books. And then I wasn't getting convinced because we are all one. Wherever we will be all in a place where there are only souls. And I used to say, how will I recognize you as a soul? Will I have a body? Things like that. I used to question. And they said, yes, everybody recognizes everybody. And I said, this is very difficult to understand. And then I had read a lot of Jainism books. And I kept on saying something is more than just staying as a soul in a one place, confined place. That's when I started searching. And I got, I mean, I had a little bit of an idea because my grandparents were, my grandfather, maternal and paternal, were Vaishnavas, but the ladies were all Jains. So this is how I understood that there's something more. And that's when I got a book from Prabhupada's book, Krishna book. And I used to read all the other books, Krishna Leela, done by Gujarati people. And I got the gist of it because I used to go to the temple with my grandparents. But when I read Prabhupada's book, it made total clear. There was a clearance that yes, we are one and the same. We are part and parcel of the Lord in a tiny, minute form. We have got all these qualities of the Lord. And then when started reading it, that's everything started coming clear.
Yeah, so very
So
good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So therefore, you can see that you hadn't accepted it. You kind of innocently, according to your upbringing, you innocently were exposed to this Jain philosophy. But then when you heard the right thing, and you mentioned that you had some doubts and you had lots of questions, but then when you heard the right thing, then you easily accepted it. Yeah, so let's have a look now at shadowy faith. This is Chaya. So we've been speaking about this. It's already come up automatically. So just we are making a distinction here between this staunch Mayavadi misunderstanding. Yeah. Now, shadowy semblance of faith is a little bit different. Now, in comparison, you could say the devious nature of reflected faith can be. Shadowy faith is a bit more, is actually innocent. So these people may have some level of faith in Krishna, but they're not ready to take up, at least the one, but they're not ready to take up the path of pure devotional service because they're too distracted by the material world. They're too distracted by material desires. But they haven't embraced a philosophy that rejects Krishna as being the supreme personality of Godhead. You know, they haven't embraced the reflective semblance of faith, the philosophy of the Mayavadi. Now, it does happen, but as we mentioned, it does happen in rare cases. But reflective semblance of faith, it has to be completely one has to completely turn away from it. But this shadowy semblance of faith, it can transform more easily into pure faith. This is Chaya bas, so the semblance of faith. So now, in contrast, shadowy semblance of faith, it's more, it upholds pure faith by, it's more simple, and it can unfold into pure faith by virtue of its simplicity. As we mentioned, like you gave yourself as an example, Mother Vishalni. So you simply had questions about it. You know, out of your natural, of course, you got family, also Vaishnavas, but you hadn't embraced the principles. So you hadn't, yeah. So it's easier for you to accept the principles of pure devotion. Yeah. Now, sometimes you may see. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So sometimes people are attracted by the externals. So someone say, a staunch Mayavadi in the Himalayas doing severe austerities, you know, they may seem to be more advanced than someone with shadowy faith. So, for instance, it may be a housewife, Hindu housewife who's got 3 children, and she has shadowy faith. And it may seem like the Mayavadis in the Himalayas doing staunch austerities, they may seem to be more advanced, but they're not. Yeah, some of the shadowy semblance of faith is actually more advanced than what they are, especially if they're blasphemous to Krishna and his pastimes, or they consider themselves one with Krishna. Yeah. So Mayavadis, they may be sometimes taking the form of karmis, yogis, and gyanis. And they got very, very meticulous in their rituals, maybe strictly regulated in their practices and very strictly controlling the senses. In that sense, they may appear to have strong faith. Yeah. But if you make a comparison, say with a novice, with a beginner who has shadowy faith, and also they're distracted by the material world, they're distracted by material desires, so their practice of devotion is quite irregular. And they may not be in control of the senses. And they may be as serving Krishna out of social convention. Yeah, they're just going along. It's a Janmastami So the parents are dragging the children to the Bhakti, so they go along as well, They take part in different, they may take part in different kirtans, etc. It's not their choice, but they're doing it out of social convention. So in that sense, they may seem to have a weaker faith than these Mayavadis who are meticulously doing staunch rituals, etc., and doing different austerities. Yeah. But now that's why we look at this word. So this is a false perception, because when the meaning of the word pratibimba, if we understand the two different meanings, which is what we're studying here today, then we can understand very clearly pratibimba in comparison to chaya, shadowy faith. So, in other words, a reflection sometimes resembles an object in detail. Like here, this is let's go back here. This is a reflection. So it resembles the tree in detail. But the important point here that's brought up, that it's not connected. It's not like a shadowy, which is mentioned as a chaya, a semblance of faith. It is connected. So in that sense, it can be purified. Yeah. So is this clear? Any questions or comments?
I didn't understand the last bit about the shadow.
Yeah, so shadow, this is representing shadowy semblance of faith. So it's just a way of understanding how it can be purified, because it's connected. It is somewhat connected to pure faith. But they've kind of innocently going along the path. They're taken up, maybe distracted by the material world, but they haven't embraced the Mayavad philosophy. So that can easily be purified. So it's just here there is a reflection, but it is separated by the bank. You see the bank here? So it's quite this reflective semblance of faith, Pratibimba, is quite detached, or not detached in the negative sense of the term. Yeah. It's very difficult to actually come to pure devotion. So that's the example that's been given here. Just that a shadow is connected and a reflection is not connected. It is separated by a bank here. And Jay Ved, do you have a question? I see your hand there.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Would you be able to explain the second picture, the uprooted tree, please?
Yeah, we're just getting there. Yeah.
Sorry.
Mentioned, no, as we mentioned, just looking here, as we have mentioned, it has to be uprooted. This reflective semblance of faith. That's what it has to be uprooted completely. Only this here, when the seed is planted in fertile soil, can it actually grow nicely. Yeah. Let me just look here. So, in contrast, a weaker shadowy of faith of a less regulated neophyte remains connected to real faith through sincerity. So with time, it can develop into pure faith. So this tree is representing the point of the reflective semblance of faith. It has to be uprooted completely. But this shadowy semblance of faith, everything doesn't have to be rejected. They've already got some faith in Krishna, but they're not embraced in Mayavad philosophy. So they can easily, they may have misconceptions, they may have misunderstandings, but it doesn't take much for them to actually accept the philosophy of Krishna consciousness because they haven't embraced these Mayavadi misconceptions. You follow? So that tree is just presenting this uprooting. Yeah. So then, is that okay?
Yes, thank
you. Yeah, yeah. So a rhetorical question might be, what's of greater and more lasting value? So a tree whose roots are pulled up from the ground, or a sapling in well-rooted, fertile soil? Yeah, which is the greater and more lasting. So it's this one here, shadowy semblance of faith. Okay, I told you it gets a bit complicated. Okay, now as Ramanath Sutta was speaking about demigod worship, so here was also mentioned, Maharaj mentions about demigod worshippers. So there's say demigod worshippers, they may stay aloof from this Mayavad philosophy. So these are examples of shadowy semblance of faith. Yeah. So they got faith, but their faith is maybe based on the conviction that their deity is non-different from Vishnu. It's just an expansion of Vishnu. But they have faith in Vishnu, but it's indirect. It's like through a demigod. So they have it's weaker than faith of the devotees' exclusive attraction to the Lord. They got some faith, but it's a little bit weaker. It's not the same as, the definition again of pure faith. It's complete dependence and complete devotion to a Krishna. But they got faith in the principle of the demigods. So they made it so their faith in Vishnu is, they got faith, but it's through the demigods. Now, as we've mentioned, I was Ramanath Sutta, I was just answering here that although it's possible to actually go through the path, to go through the arduous journey through the Panchaposhana, as you mentioned, to a pure faith, is very difficult because of the intricacies and the processes involved in properly worshipping the specific deities, in properly worshipping. So we haven't got time to get into the detailed, complex rituals. For instance, for worshipping Durga, for example, that one will have to go through to come to pure faith. So what they do is they elevate, they have a foundation of worship of Durga and the ritualistic worship of Surya, Ganesh, then they worship Shiva, and finally Vishnu. That's the idea. So therefore, generally Prabhupada, Ramanath Prabhu?
Yeah, this is not fair for me to do this to you because it's getting late. But I maybe we can continue it in the next session.
Yeah.
With this topic. But in the Hare Krishna movement, in ISKCON, I mean, I just wrote a whole article on it. It's going to be published in Back to Godhead magazine. We worship Durga. How do we worship Durga? As Subhadra, but we're worshiping her as Yogamaya, not Mahamaya. But worship of Durga, nonetheless, it is worship of Durga. Most people don't know that. Most devotees don't know that. And most people
devotees,
come to our
most devotees don't know it, and most devotees do not need to know it. Not for pure devotion. They may know it, okay, but actually Subhadra, if you get into, you can, okay.
Well, I mean, most devotees don't need to know it. I agree, but for those devotees who are attached to demigod worship, it can be something that will help them. In other words, the gopis also worship Durga as Katyayani, but that's a Yogamaya form also.
Yeah,
So
but
these are subtleties and nuances. I know that, and it's hard to get into a full discussion about it right
yeah,
now.
yeah, it's
But
interesting points. Yeah,
technically, Subhadra is Durga worshipped as Yoga Maya.
yeah, but yes, yeah, technically, but we worship Subhadra and we don't worship Durga. Yeah, and
Exactly. It's Subhadra.
Katyayani also
It's the auspicious Bhadra, Subhadra.
yes,
But technically, Durga has two manifestations. Same thing, similar thing with Shiva, two manifestations. One manifestation will contaminate you, keep you in the material world. But the other manifestation, when they're seen in relationship to Krishna, in relationship to them as devotees of Krishna, it can actually expedite devotional service.
yeah, and you gave the example of the gopis worshipping Katyayani as well. I mean, that's
these things are not suggested. I know that.
but I'm
It's
saying
a very strict. There's a strict vrata. But in ISKCON, we also worship Durga 365 days a year, and many hundreds of temples, but as Yoga Maya.
yeah, but Prabhupada didn't specifically say that we're worshipping Durga. He never said anything
No,
like
he did. No, there's lectures to this extent. Early on in the movement,
it says we're worshipping Durga.
Article. Yeah.
He didn't give us Durga on the altars, that's for sure.
No.
He gave
the name of my article, when it comes out, I hope devotees read. Name of my article is Mahamaya or Yoga Maya, question mark. The confusion of illusion. It's confusing. I know it's a confusing topic.
Yeah. But Katyayani, then I mean, the worship of the gopis. We can't imitate the worship of the gopis.
We can't imitate it. At the same time, we have to understand what's going on.
Yeah, but
on a metaphysical level.
Yeah,
it's a the Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a very sophisticated theology. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's true, but I'm just making a point here is that we follow the Goswamis. We don't imitate the gopis and worship.
Of course not.
The Rupa Goswami
we do
didn't.
not.
Rupa Goswami,
I would never advise anyone to take a Katyayani vrat because it's extremely severe, number one, and it requires really advanced guidance from a guru to do that. But my point is, in ISKCON, Durga manifests as Subhadra, but not as Mahamaya, as Yoga Maya. In other words, Durga, as I explained in my article, has a kind of split personality. As a way of thinking of it.
Yeah.
So this is a confusing topic, and I'm inconveniencing you by bringing it up at the end. I know that.
No, it's okay. It's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting
Yeah.
discussion. But as far as Prabhupada discouraged demigod worship, basically. So
Yes.
he gave transcendental knowledge, and he reassured everyone, all the followers of demigods, that if you serve Krishna, that's the best way to serve all the demigods, is to serve Krishna. And then all the demigods are pleased.
Exactly. That's our philosophy. I know. We don't worship Durga during the Durga Puja festivals or anything like that. I know that. I'm just making a point that these topics are nuanced. That there's subtleties, and a lot of times devotees don't even themselves understand what's going on. Where on the altar there's Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra. Subhadra is Krishna's sister. Krishna's sister is Durga, but she's worshipped as Yoga Maya.
Yeah,
which is fine. Which is what we do. That's what Gaudiya Vaishnavas do. We worship Durga as Yoga Maya.
Yeah. And then you could take it all the way back that we're worshipping Radharani, ultimately.
We do worship Radha and Krishna. But ultimately, I mean, I could get into the technicalities, but then it gets complex in terms of Durga coming from Rama Devi, which is a Lakshmi Devi in the Vaikunthas.
And so actually coming from Radharani, ultimately. So you could say
ultimately coming from Radharani. That's the point.
Yeah.
That we have to. The problem comes when the demigod worshippers they make a distance between the devas and Krishna, and they don't see the connection, then all the problems come.
Yeah, what's that offense? It's considered the names of demigods to be equal to or independent.
Independent, yeah.
An interesting.
So, and the Panchapasana system said it's all one anyway. Durga is as good as Vishnu, as good as Ganesh, and it all ends up in the same impersonal mishmash, Brahma Jyoti.
Yeah.
So that's Mayavad. I know that. But my point is, Durga, when petitioned to advance in Krishna Bhakti, that's Yoga Maya. That helps the devotee, and that's what we do.
Yeah, and that is Subhadra.
Subhadra.
Yeah, so it's nice. It's good to understand because often devotees are confused about the role of Subhadra, and
it is confusing. I know.
It'd be interesting to read your article.
I did quite a bit of research to make sure it was in line with Gaudiya Siddhanta, and the editors at BTG said yes, they approved. So anyway, it's coming out.
Thank you. Okay, very interesting discussion, and we can continue next week. Thank you for joining us, Ramanath. So thank you, dear devotees. I hope this discussion was of interest, and we'll pick it up next week. We have 2 more slides to go in this chapter here. We have this one here, speaking about Brahmavadis, and we're speaking also, we're mentioning about Prahlad Maharaj, how he inadvertently was engaged in worship, even without his knowing. Then he became a great devotee. So we'll look at that next week. Okay. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for joining us. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.